So, Prime Minister, this is, while it's getting pulled up, yep, there it is. We know at this point in the evidence before the Commission that on September 28th, 2019, the Site Task Force and CSIS gave a briefing to the security-cleared representative of the Liberal Party about foreign interference in the Don Valley North riding. We also know from Mr. Broadhurst that he then received that information. How did this play out from your perspective?
Late in September, as I was coming through Ottawa, I believe I was on my way out across the country for another stretch of campaigning. I believe it was on a Sunday as I was heading out after Saturday with my family. Mr. Broadhurst met me at the airport in a holding room, in a lounge on the government side of the airport, government terminal in the airport, to let me know of concerns that he had received from the Site Task Force and CSIS about the nomination campaign, the nomination election, the nomination race contest in Don Valley North. He shared with me that intelligence services had shared with him concerns that Chinese officials in Canada had been developing plans to possibly engage in interference in the nomination contest, specifically by mobilizing buses filled with, and the challenge in this is always trying to pick out what I heard exactly then from what I knew later, but I believe it was either buses full of students or buses filled with Chinese speakers or Chinese diaspora members who would be mobilized to support Han Dong, who would have been mobilized to support Han Dong in that nomination contest of a few weeks previous. In what ended up being probably a 20-minute to half-hour conversation with Mr. Broadhurst, I asked him more specifically about, okay, so they had plans or an intent or a capacity to do this. Do we know that they did? Did you hear from CSIS and the security agencies that this was actually done? They weren't entirely certain. There was reasons to believe that perhaps it has, and perhaps the indication was that there were buses filled with Chinese speakers at that nomination contest. I asked if, and as a matter of course, those who are in politics and certainly on the ground riding politics know that it is regular for buses to be mobilized particularly in contested nominations of community organizations, student groups, a particular seniors residence could bring a minibus full of seniors to participate in a nomination contest. So just the existence of buses wasn't enough, buses with Chinese speakers or Mandarin speakers in them wasn't enough to be itself alarming or a condemnation, but there were clear indications that there were concerns by CSIS that China might have been behind this, and that those students or those individuals on the bus might have been motivated or mobilized to vote in that way, and there were concerns that CSIS had. I asked the extent to which they were certain that it happened, the extent to which they were certain that China was indeed behind the mobilizing of the bus or buses. And I also asked whether or not CSIS had information that Han Dong knew about this, whether he was a witting and aware that China had mobilized, or Chinese officials had mobilized buses for him or not. And the answers were not clear from CSIS at that point, according to what Mr. Broadhurst told me. I then I also asked if it was a close nomination, if there was a sense that the actual result of the nomination could have been affected by this bus or buses or what was there, and that wasn't clear at all. CSIS didn't have any conclusions to share at that point. I asked Mr. Broadhurst whether CSIS was making any recommendations or suggestions as to what we should do with this information. And it was clear to Mr. Broadhurst that this was very much about just letting us know so that we know and could perhaps take any actions that we deemed appropriate, but they weren't going to be recommending for us to take action of one way or another. But they also specified that this was secret information that we could not share with the candidate in question, Mr. Dong, or the public at large in terms of what they were telling us about these concerns and these allegations. I then asked Mr. Broadhurst what the Liberal Party processes that are in place to oversee nominations, particularly contested nominations, had flagged around that nomination contest of a few weeks before. There are party officials that oversee the voting, the registrations, the voting, the processes, the counting. There are lawyers in place overseeing the count. There are possibilities for the losing contestant or contestants to challenge the result if they feel it was unfair. There are many processes because political parties often have some very complex fights around nomination parties, all nomination contests. All political parties are like that. And Mr. Broadhurst assured me that they had looked into, when they heard these allegations or this information from CSIS and CITE, and had no flags on the nomination process. So then I had what was a brief conversation with Mr. Broadhurst after we had established all that, to sort of agree that the threshold for overturning a democratic event like an official party nomination to find out who would be the candidate for a general election, particularly during an election, general election, must have a fairly high threshold for removal of that candidate. And that was really sort of the binary choice we were placed with in that situation. Acting would be removing Han Dong as our official candidate. The other choice would be not to remove that candidate. But even not having removed that candidate, it would be something, given this information, that we would have to revisit. Certainly in the case that that candidate got elected, there would be questions we would have to follow up on after the election to properly understand what happened and what the issues or the risks were in this situation.